Don't touch her bag until you check the camera. Ethan Brooks set his tray down so hard the silverware trembled. Marcus Doyle froze with Grace Miller's worn canvas purse in one hand, while the dinner crowd stared from white tablecloths and candlelight. Behind Ethan's black apron, 8-year-old Noah pointed at the small necklace against Grace's throat. "Daddy, that looks like the one in the old picture." Across the dining room, Charles Whitmore turned pale. 3 hours earlier, Whitmore's on Grand had looked too polished for trouble. Brass rails gleamed under warm pendant lights. Wineglasses caught tiny flames from the candles. The kitchen doors swung in and out with the steady rhythm of a heartbeat, carrying the smell of roasted garlic, lemon butter, hot bread, and the sharp sting of dish soap from the back room. Ethan Brooks moved through it all quietly, balancing plates on one forearm, refilling water before anyone asked, keeping one eye on table 12 and the other on the small booth near the service station where Noah sat doing math homework with a pencil worn down to the wood. Ethan was 39, a single father, a waiter with tired shoes, a white shirt pressed as neatly as he could manage, and an old watch on his wrist that had belonged to his wife. He did not look like the kind of man who could stop a room. That was why most people did not notice him until he did. Grace Miller passed behind him with a gray tub of dishes hugged to her waist. Her sleeves were damp. A strand of hair had slipped loose near her cheek. Around her neck, half hidden beneath the collar of her plain kitchen shirt, hung a small silver necklace, old enough to look worthless to anyone who only understood shine. She kept touching it whenever Marcus came near. Ethan noticed that. He noticed the way Marcus smiled politely for guests and spoke sharply when the kitchen door closed. He noticed the way Victor Hale, the chef, glanced at Grace's name tag like it offended him. And he noticed something else that did not fit. The hallway camera above the wine cabinet had a tiny red light that blinked steadily all night, but just before the second seating, it stopped blinking for a breath too long. Ethan was setting down a plate of sea bass when Mrs. Caldwell at table 12 lifted her hand and screamed, "My ring! My diamond ring is gone." Fork stopped. Conversations snapped shut. Marcus arrived before anyone could ask a question. Smooth suit, calm voice, perfect mask. "No one leaves the service area," he said. "We'll handle this professionally." But his eyes went straight to Grace. She stood by the dish cart, wet hands open, face drained of color. Ethan stepped toward her before he had time to think about his rent, his tips, or the boy watching from the booth. Then Noah slid down from his seat, pointed past Ethan's elbow, and whispered about the necklace. At that exact moment, Charles Whitmore gripped the back of a chair as if the floor had moved under him. Charles Whitmore's hand stayed locked around the back of the chair, his knuckles white beneath the soft amber glow. While the room waited for someone important to decide what was true, Marcus noticed the pause and stepped into it with a practiced smile. "Mr. Whitmore, I have this under control." "Then control it fairly," Ethan said. "Fairly is exactly what I'm doing." The word sounded clean, almost kind, but Marcus still had Grace's canvas purse in his hand. The leather soles of his shoes clicked across the marble as he turned toward the guests, lowering his voice just enough to make cruelty feel professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the interruption. For everyone's comfort and security, we'll follow standard procedure." His eyes moved back to Grace. "We'll begin with the employees who had access to table 12. Grace swallowed. The dishwater smell clung to her sleeves, sharp and soapy, and a thin line of steam rose from the gray tub beside her. She looked smaller beneath the chandelier, not because she was weak, but because the room had decided she was. Victor Hale pushed through the kitchen doors, wiping his hands on a white towel folded too neatly. "She was near that station twice," he said, "and her file already has gaps." Grace's fingers went to the necklace beneath her collar. Ethan saw it. Charles saw it too. "What gaps?" Ethan asked. Marcus gave him a look that barely touched him, the kind a manager gives a waiter who has forgotten his place. "Ethan, this is not your section anymore. She's not evidence. She's an employee under review. Then review everyone." A quiet clink ran through the room as someone set down a wineglass too hard. Noah stood behind the service stand, both hands pressed around his pencil, watching his father the way children watch storms they do not understand. Ethan turned just slightly and gave him a small nod, the kind that meant stay there, breathe, you're safe. Then he faced Marcus again. He did not raise his voice. That was what made several people lean closer. Marcus opened Grace's purse on a side table covered with a white linen cloth. Inside were ordinary things. A cracked phone, a bus pass, a folded hair tie, a packet of mints, $2 in coins, and a paper napkin with grease stains from staff meal. Nothing glittered. Nothing accused her. But Marcus lifted each item with 2 fingers, as if poverty itself might leave residue. We're only trying to clear this up, he said. Grace whispered, please don't take the necklace. Victor's eyes sharpened. Why would anyone take a necklace if we're looking for a ring? The question was soft, but it landed wrong. Charles shifted behind them, his gaze dropping again to the thin silver chain at Grace's throat. For 1 second, his face changed from owner to old man, from authority to ache. Then Richard Hale appeared near the hallway to the offices, calm in a navy suit, one hand resting on the brass rail. Charles, he said, smooth as poured cream, don't let emotion confuse a simple matter. Ethan noticed something then. Richard had not asked what happened. He had not asked whose ring was missing. He looked first at Grace, then at the necklace, and only then at the purse. Marcus cleared his throat and reached for a printed incident form. Ethan, since you witnessed the employee's access to the room, I'll need your signature. He placed the paper beside the spilled contents of Grace's purse, the pen lined perfectly at the bottom. Ethan looked at the blank signature line, then at Grace's wet hands, then at the camera dome above the wine cabinet where the red light blinked once, paused, and blinked again. And for the first time that night, he wondered why a man who claimed to have everything under control needed a waiter's name so badly. Ethan looked at the signature line until the ink seemed heavier than the paper. Marcus had placed the form beside Grace's emptied purse like a trap with clean edges. The pen angled toward Ethan's hand, the little black letters already deciding what the room wanted him to say. Witness confirms employee access. It was such a small sentence, small enough to hide a lie inside it. Sign there, Marcus said softly. Ethan picked up the pen, and for a second Noah's breath caught behind the service stand. Rent was due Friday. His tips from that weekend were supposed to buy groceries, school shoes, and the refill for Noah's asthma inhaler waiting at the pharmacy. The old watch on Ethan's wrist ticked beneath his cuff, a quiet sound from a woman who was no longer there to tell him what courage cost. He set the pen back down. I didn't witness theft, he said. Marcus's smile thinned. You witnessed access. That's not the same thing. The words did not boom. They simply stood there. Grace blinked once, as if no one had ever spent anything on her honesty before. Ethan reached across the linen table, not toward the necklace, not toward the form, but toward the spilled contents of her purse. He gathered them with careful hands. The cracked phone, the bus pass, the folded hair tie, the little packet of mints, the $2 in coins. He did not make a show of it. He did not ask permission from the room. He just returned each small piece of her life to the bag as if it deserved the same respect as Mrs. Caldwell's missing diamond. When he found the paper napkin from staff meal, damp at one corner, he folded it cleanly and placed it on top. Grace whispered, "Thank you." Marcus gave a quiet laugh through his nose. Noble Ethan. But kindness doesn't replace policy. Ethan looked at him. Neither does suspicion. Victor shifted by the kitchen doors, arms crossed over his white coat. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Ethan turned slightly toward Noah, who was still clutching his pencil like a tiny guardrail against fear. Buddy, stay by the coffee station. Don't move unless Mr. Whitmore says it's safe. Noah nodded, too serious for 8 years old. His eyes kept drifting to Grace's necklace, which had slipped outside her collar when she bent forward. The silver pendant was smudged with dishwater and steam, its tiny hinge catching the chandelier light in a dull, uneven flash. Ethan noticed Grace's hand trembling near it, so he picked up a clean white service towel from the sideboard and offered it to her. Palm open, not touching her, not crowding her. "For your hands," he said. "And if they need to check anything, they can do it in the office. Not out here like this." Charles Whitmore watched from beside the chair, his face guarded again, but something in his eyes had changed. He had seen wealthy men give speeches about dignity at charity dinners. He had rarely seen a waiter risk his job for it in silence. Richard Hale leaned closer to Charles and murmured, "This is exactly how rumors start. Staff drama in front of guests." Ethan heard enough. He looked at the white linen, the purse now packed again, the unsigned form, and the camera dome above the wine cabinet. Its red light blinked twice, then held dark for one breath too long. Without saying another word, Ethan took the duplicate incident form Marcus had left under the first page and slid it beneath an empty bread plate, not to hide it, but to keep it from disappearing before someone honest could read it. Marcus's eyes flicked down just once, too fast for most people. But Charles saw it. Grace saw it. And Ethan understood then that refusing to sign the lie had not only protected her name, it had preserved the first piece of proof that someone in that room was trying to control the truth. Marcus saw Ethan slide the duplicate form beneath the bread plate, and his smile changed by less than a breath. Not anger, not fear. Something cleaner and colder, like a man adjusting a cuff before doing damage. "Now you're interfering with documentation," he said, still quiet enough for the guests to believe he was the reasonable one. Ethan left the plate where it was. "I'm preserving it. You're a waiter. Then it shouldn't scare you." A few heads turned at that, not because Ethan was loud, but because he was not. The dining room had grown so still that the soft jazz from the speakers seemed suddenly inappropriate. A trumpet line floating above white tablecloths, spilled water, and Grace Miller's empty dignity. Charles Whitmore finally moved, his hands sliding from the chair back as if he had remembered he owned not just the building, but the responsibility inside it. "Show me the camera." Marcus blinked once. "Sir, I can handle the review privately." "Show me." Richard's jaw tightened near the brass rail, but he said nothing. Victor Hale exhaled through his nose as if the whole thing were beneath the kitchen's time, beneath the orders waiting under heat lamps, beneath people who mattered. Marcus led them to the small monitor station beside the wine cabinet, where a security screen glowed blue-white against the dark wood. Ethan stayed 2 steps back with his hands visible. Grace stood near the dish cart, holding the clean towel against her wet fingers. Noah remained by the coffee station, exactly where his father had told him to stay, his pencil tucked behind one ear like he was trying very hard to be brave without being in the way. Marcus tapped the screen. The footage showed table 12. Mrs. Caldwell laughing, a server passing, Grace carrying a gray tub. Then the image flickered. The clock in the corner jumped. One moment it read 7 hours 41 minutes and 13 seconds. The next it read 7 hours 42 minutes and 47 seconds. 94 seconds vanished without sound, without warning, without the honest blur of a broken camera. Marcus spoke before anyone else could. "Minor system lag. Happens on busy nights when the network is overloaded." Ethan looked from the screen to the round wall clock above the host stand. Its second hand moved with patient certainty. "Why is the camera clock behind the dining room clock?" Marcus turned. "What?" Ethan pointed, not dramatically, just enough. "That footage says 7:42. The wall clock in the reflection says 7:44. Charles leaned closer to the monitor. There it was, faint in the mirrored wine glass behind table 12. The wall clock, small but clear, telling a different truth. Richard stepped forward too quickly, his shoulder nearly blocking the screen. "Digital systems drift. This is not unusual." "Then why did you say network lag?" Ethan asked. The question was simple. It landed like a dropped knife. Marcus's mouth opened, then closed. Richard answered for him. "Because both can be true." Noah's small voice came from the coffee station. "Daddy." The red light went off before the lady yelled. The room turned toward him, and Ethan's face tightened at once. Protective, gentle. "Noah, that's enough. Stay where you are." Charles did not question the boy. He only looked back at the camera dome above the wine cabinet, where the red light now blinked steadily, innocent as a heartbeat after a lie. Grace's fingers went to her necklace again. The pendant slipped fully into view, its dull silver hinge catching the same blue-white glow as the monitor. Charles saw it and lost focus for half a second, as if the present had cracked and let an older room shine through. Marcus reached for the mouse. "I'll pull the backup feed." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "Don't touch it until an outside technician copies the file." Marcus looked at Charles, offended in the polished way men use when truth begins to corner them. "Are we really letting floor staff dictate evidence handling?" Charles stared at the frozen frame. Grace near table 12, the missing 94 seconds, the wrong timestamp, Richard's shoulder still too close to the screen. "No," he said slowly. "We're letting the evidence stay where it is." And in the reflection of the monitor, Ethan noticed one more thing that chilled him deeper than the missing footage. Richard Hale had been standing beside the camera hallway before the red light went dark. Ethan kept his eyes on the monitor reflection, on the narrow slice of hallway caught in the glass, on Richard Hale standing where he had no reason to stand before the red light went dark. He did not say it out loud. Not yet. A truth spoken too early could be crushed by a louder man. And Ethan had spent enough years carrying trays through expensive rooms to know that quiet facts survived longer than public accusations. Marcus reached again for the mouse. "I can export the footage in my office," he said. "No need to make this a spectacle." Charles's hand came down on the edge of the monitor desk. Not hard, but final. The wood gave a soft knock. "Nobody touches that file." For the first time, Marcus's smile did not arrive on time. Victor shifted by the kitchen doors. Richard looked toward the front windows, where the rain outside had begun to streak the glass and blur the city lights into long trembling lines. Grace stood so still that the towel in her hands had stopped dripping. Then Mrs. Caldwell, still flushed with embarrassment and anger, said from table 12, "If she didn't take it, prove it." The room turned to Ethan as if proof were something a waiter should pull from his apron pocket. Marcus seized the moment. "Exactly. We need facts, not feelings." Ethan nodded once. "Then let's use the facts your restaurant already keeps." Marcus frowned. "Meaning?" Ethan looked toward the service station. "Every table has a service log. Every reprint has a timestamp. Every seat change gets recorded through the POS." He did not say it like a challenge. He said it like a man naming the weather. Marcus gave a polite little laugh. "That system is for operations, Ethan. It won't answer theft allegations. It will answer time." Charles looked at him then. Fully. Not warmly. Not yet. But differently, the way a man looks at a locked door after hearing something move behind it. "Pull the log for table 12, Charles said. Marcus hesitated just long enough for the silence to notice. Then he turned to the POS station with smooth obedience. "Of course." The printer under the counter woke with a dry mechanical chatter, spitting out a narrow white receipt that curled against Marcus's fingers. Ethan stayed beside Grace, leaving space between them so the room could not turn his protection into impropriety. Noah watched from the coffee station, shoulders lower now, but his small face still pale. Ethan gave him one quiet look, and the boy sat back down without being told twice. Marcus scanned the printout. As expected, Grace had access at 7:41. Ethan did not reach for it. "May I see the reprint time?" Marcus's thumb covered the lower corner. "That isn't relevant." "Then it won't hurt." Charles extended his hand. Marcus placed the paper in it, and the chandelier light caught the black ink at the bottom. Reprinted 8:16 p.m. Modified 7:58 p.m. A chair leg scraped, then stopped halfway across the marble. Someone in the dining room had been whispering, but the whisper died before it became a sentence. Charles read it again, slower. "Modified." Marcus answered quickly. "Routine correction. Staff assignments get adjusted all the time during dinner rush." Ethan looked at the service log screen, then at Grace. Grace was washing dishes at 7:58. "I sent 2 tubs back myself." Grace nodded, barely breathing. Victor cut in. "That doesn't mean anything. Kitchen timing gets messy." Ethan's voice stayed low. Then check the dish station ticket rail. Marcus stiffened. Ethan. But Charles had already turned. On the steel rail by the dish pit, clipped among damp order slips and steam-softened paper, was a narrow service ticket marked 756, Table 12 cleared by Ethan Brooks, not Grace Miller. The ink had bled slightly from dishwater mist, but the name was readable. Ethan had not saved it to trap anyone. He had saved it because waiters saved tickets when guests disputed timing, courses, allergies, bills. Ordinary habits. Ordinary work. Suddenly, ordinary work had teeth. Charles picked up the ticket with 2 fingers and placed it beside the POS receipt. Grace's name had been moved after the fact. The evidence did not free her completely, but it opened the first clean crack in the wall built around her. Marcus folded his hands in front of him, professional again, almost gentle. This is exactly why internal matters shouldn't be handled in public. People misunderstand partial information. Ethan looked at the 2 timestamps. Partial information is what almost got her searched in front of strangers. Charles did not respond, but he slid both papers into a leather check presenter and kept it under his palm. Across the room, Richard Hale's eyes dropped not to the receipt, not to Marcus, but to the silver necklace at Grace's throat, and Ethan saw the older man's expression tighten as if the wrong door had just opened. Richard Hale's eyes stayed on the necklace as if the silver chain were a witness he had failed to silence. The POS receipt and the damp service ticket lay under Charles Whitmore's palm inside the leather check presenter. 2 ordinary scraps of restaurant paper suddenly heavier than every crystal glass in the room. Grace was no longer proven guilty by timing. That did not make her safe. It only meant someone had needed the timing to lie. Marcus adjusted his cuffs and spoke with careful softness. Charles, this is becoming a personnel matter. Let's move it upstairs. Ethan saw Grace's shoulders tighten at the word upstairs, as if closed doors had never been kind to her. He made a choice then, small and quiet. He did not accuse Marcus. He did not point at Richard. He turned to Grace and said, "You don't have to answer anything in a room where they're calling you dishonest. But if there's something they're using against you, you can name it." Grace looked at the floor, where a drop of dishwater had fallen from her sleeve and darkened the marble. "My name isn't Grace Miller," she whispered. The room seemed to breathe in at once. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. Victor's towel stopped moving in his hands. Richard stepped forward. "That's enough." Charles lifted his head slowly. Grace's fingers found the necklace. "My mother called me Lily Harper. I used Grace because every time I tried to ask about her, doors closed." Ethan did not look surprised. He only moved 1 step closer to the service table, putting himself between Grace and the men who wanted the story contained. "Do you have anything with that name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then reached into the canvas purse Ethan had repacked for her. From a hidden seam near the bottom, she pulled out a soft, folded bus ticket, worn thin at the creases, and a square of paper with an old hospital address written in blue ink. The bus ticket had been rubbed so often that one corner had gone pale, but the destination was still clear. Lakeview County Medical Center. Charles's face changed. Not belief. Not yet. Recognition fighting fear. "That hospital closed 15 years ago," he said. Grace nodded. "My mother died there." Richard gave a quiet laugh, but it came too fast. "A dead hospital and a bus ticket don't make a family history." "No," Ethan said, "but they explain why she was looking." Charles turned toward his private office at the back of the dining room. For a moment, no one followed. The old man moved like someone walking into weather he had avoided for years. When he returned, he carried a small wooden box, dark cherry, polished thin at the corners by hands that had opened it too many times and not enough. He set it on the host's stand. The hinges creaked. Inside were a woman's faded photograph, a child's ribbon, and a picture of a little girl sitting on the front steps of Whitmore's, her smile crooked, her neck shining with a tiny silver pendant. The same shape, the same hinge, the same dull crescent at the edge. Charles did not touch Grace. He did not claim her. He stared at the photograph until his breath shook. "Where did you get that necklace?" he asked. Grace's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "My mother said it was the only thing my father ever made with his own hands." Richard's phone buzzed once in his pocket. He silenced it without looking, but Ethan saw the name flash before the screen went dark. Admin security. Marcus saw it too, and his face lost color beneath the restaurant lights. Charles looked from the bus ticket to the photograph, from the photograph to the necklace, from the necklace to Richard. "Why did you say this was simple?" Richard's smile returned, thinner now. "Because grief makes people see patterns where none exist." But when he said it, he was looking at Ethan, not Charles, and Ethan understood that the truth had become too heavy for an office, too dangerous for a whisper, and too public to bury again. The host stand became the table of truth. Charles Whitmore ordered the dining room doors closed. Not locked this time, just closed enough to stop the noise from escaping and force everyone inside to face what had already happened there. The same white linen side table sat beneath the chandelier, the same place where Grace's purse had been emptied like her privacy meant nothing. Ethan stood beside it with tired shoulders, his black apron still stained by a splash of coffee from table 6. He did not look victorious. He looked like a man who knew being right did not erase what someone else had suffered. Grace stood a few feet behind him, the clean towel folded in both hands, her necklace resting openly against her collarbone now. Noah stayed at the coffee station, close enough to see, far enough to be safe, his pencil still tucked behind his ear. Richard Hale stepped forward first, smooth and sorrowful, turning toward the staff and the remaining guests as if he had been forced into an unpleasant duty. "What you are seeing," he said, "is a misunderstanding being inflated by emotion. A missing ring, a frightened employee using a false name, and a waiter who has allowed compassion to outrun judgment." For a moment it worked. A few faces softened. Marcus stood straighter, grateful for the cover. Victor looked relieved, as if the kitchen might still return to normal. Then Ethan placed the POS receipt on the linen. "This is not emotion." He placed the damp service ticket beside it. "This is time." Charles watched without moving. Ethan pointed to the receipt but did not touch Richard, Marcus, or Grace with accusation. The log was modified at 7:58. The dish ticket shows Grace was not at table 12 then. She was in the back. Marcus folded his hands. "Routine corrections happen constantly." Richard nodded. "Exactly. That proves nothing except a rushed dinner service." The room almost breathed out. Then Charles reached into the leather check presenter and laid down the still image from the security monitor. Table 12, the reflection of the wall clock, and the missing 94 seconds marked by the jump in the corner timestamp. "Routine corrections do not erase 94 seconds, Charles said. His voice was low, but every server heard it. Richard's eyes narrowed. "Digital drift, Charles. You know how old this system is." Ethan lifted his gaze. "Then why did your phone show admin security before the technician was called?" The sentence was quiet enough to feel accidental and sharp enough to cut. Richard turned toward him slowly. "Careful, Ethan. Did not move. I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here because she was almost punished without truth." Grace's grip tightened on the towel. Charles opened the wooden box on the host stand and placed the faded photograph under the chandelier light. The little girl in the picture smiled from the front steps of Whitmore's, wearing the same crescent-shaped pendant. Noah looked from the photograph to Grace, then whispered, "It's the same one." That was all he said. A child's observation, simple and safe, but it landed where adult explanations had failed. Richard stepped forward too quickly. "A similar necklace means nothing. People copy old designs." Grace flinched, not from his volume, but from the certainty in his lie. Charles did not ask Richard another question. He looked at Grace. "May I see it?" She hesitated. Ethan took half a step back, giving her the choice. Slowly, Grace unclasped the necklace and placed it in Charles Whitmore's open palm. Richard's face changed before the pendant was even opened, and Ethan saw it clearly. Not grief, not surprise, but fear. Charles brought the tiny hinge toward the light, his thumb trembling against the silver seam, and the whole room seemed to lean in as the last hidden thing waited to be opened. Charles opened the tiny silver pendant, and the room forgot how to breathe. Inside, beneath years of tarnish and kitchen steam, 3 small letters caught the chandelier light. LHW. Then the line beneath them, so fine it looked almost like a scratch until Charles read it aloud. "Come home when you're ready." His voice broke on the last word. Grace covered her mouth with both hands, the towel falling silently to the marble. Charles looked at her, not as an owner looking at an employee, not as a rich man looking at someone beneath him, but as a father staring at a door he had thought death had closed. "That's my daughter's necklace," he whispered. No one moved. The jazz speaker clicked between songs. A fork settled against a plate with a tiny silver tap. Somewhere near the bar, a phone buzzed once and went unanswered. Marcus's polished face emptied of all certainty. Victor lowered his towel. Richard Hale stood perfectly still, but his right hand twitched near his jacket pocket, as if reaching for control that was no longer there. Charles turned to him. "You told me she was gone." Richard swallowed. "Charles, grief has made this." No, Ethan's voice was quiet, but it stopped the sentence cleanly. "Let the evidence finish." The outside technician arrived at the monitor station with a laptop bag still wet from rain. Charles gave him permission. Richard said nothing, and that silence was its own confession. The technician copied the security file, checked the access log, and after a few keystrokes the screen filled with a list of administrator entries. One line stood out: Auxiliary Admin, 7:40 p.m., Manual Deletion, Camera 12 Hallway. The account name belonged to Richard Hale. The dining room went colder than the rain against the windows. Richard's lips parted, but no explanation came. Then Mrs. Caldwell's husband suddenly pushed back his chair, embarrassed and pale. "Wait," he said, reaching toward the coat draped behind his wife's seat. From the inside pocket of a spare dinner jacket, he pulled a small velvet pouch. The missing diamond ring slid into his palm, bright and useless under the lights. Mrs. Caldwell gasped. "I put it there when I washed my hands." Marcus stared at the ring as if it had betrayed him. Grace had not stolen anything. She had stood under accusation while the truth sat folded in a rich woman's coat. Charles looked at Marcus first. "You searched her purse before you checked the guest's jacket." Marcus's voice dried to a whisper. "I was following urgency." "No," Charles said. "You were following convenience." Then he turned to Richard. The old family calm was gone from his face, replaced by something heavier than anger. "You erased footage. You helped bury her papers. You called it protection." Richard finally bent under the weight of every receipt, every missing second, every name he had pretended not to know. "I kept this family intact," he said, but nobody believed him now. Grace looked at Charles through tears that had not yet fallen. "Why didn't anyone look for me?" That question did what the evidence could not. It made the victory hurt. Ethan lowered his eyes, one hand resting gently on Noah's shoulder as the boy leaned against him and exhaled for the first time in minutes. The room had been forced into silence, but healing had not begun yet. And as Charles held the open necklace in his trembling palm, everyone turned toward Ethan Brooks, wondering what a man who had just saved the truth would choose to do with the power of being believed. The first thing Ethan did with the power of being believed was nothing loud. He did not point at Marcus. He did not step toward Richard. He only bent down, picked up the clean towel Grace had dropped, folded it once, and laid it beside her open purse as if her dignity deserved to be restored piece by piece. The dining room emptied slowly, not with applause, but with lowered eyes, soft chair legs, and the dull murmur of people realizing how close they had come to ruining an innocent woman because it was easier than waiting for truth. Charles Whitmore ordered the security file preserved, suspended Richard Hale's operating authority before the staff, and told his attorney on speakerphone to prepare a full review for law enforcement. Deleted footage, altered records, destroyed identity documents, all of it. Marcus Doyle was removed from the floor that night, not dragged out, not humiliated for entertainment, just relieved of the authority he had used without fairness. Victor Hale stood near the kitchen doors with his towel hanging loose in one hand, unable to meet Grace's eyes when Charles said every employee policy would be rewritten. starting with the rule that no worker would ever again be searched in public without evidence and representation. Grace, or Lily Harper Whitmore, stood beneath the chandelier with the necklace back in her hands. A few hours earlier, it had looked like a poor girl's little keepsake, something Marcus had almost treated as clutter. Now it was proof, memory, a bridge. Charles did not rush to embrace her. He stopped an arm's length away, old and shaken, and said, "I don't have the right to ask you to forgive me tonight, but I do have the responsibility to make sure no one buries your name again." Lily looked at him for a long moment. "I need time," she whispered. Charles nodded as if those 3 words were a gift he did not deserve. "Then time is what I'll give you." Ethan felt Noah's small hand slip into his. The boy looked up, eyes damp but calm now. "Did I help, Daddy?" Ethan squeezed his fingers. "You told the truth about what you saw. Then you let the grown-ups do the rest." That seemed to settle something in Noah's chest. Charles turned to Ethan then, and the room grew quiet in a different way. Not the frozen silence of shock, but the kind that waits for respect to find the right words. "Mr. Brooks," Charles said, "you protected my daughter before you knew she was my daughter. That is not poverty. That is character." Ethan looked down at his stained apron, the old watch on his wrist, the shoes that still hurt from the dinner rush. "I just didn't want her standing alone. That is exactly why it mattered." Charles offered him a promotion later, not as payment for silence, but as a role helping rebuild staff trust and training new hires on dignity in the workplace. Ethan did not answer immediately. He asked first if Lily would have independent legal counsel, if her records would be restored properly, if Noah could finish his homework before they went home. Charles said yes to all 3. Only then did Ethan nod. Near midnight, after the guests were gone and the candles had burned low, Lily placed the necklace around her own neck again. This time her fingers did not tremble. Marcus's unsigned form lay in an evidence folder. The POS receipt and damp service ticket rested beside it. No longer scraps of paper, but small witnesses that had refused to let a lie close its fist. Ethan carried one last tray to the kitchen, then came back for Noah's backpack. He passed Lily at the host's stand, where Charles was quietly writing her true name on a fresh folder. Lily Harper Whitmore. She touched the necklace and gave Ethan a small, broken smile. "You didn't even know me," she said. Ethan glanced at his son, then at the dining room where judgment had turned into understanding. "I didn't need to." Outside, rain softened the windows, and inside, no one spoke for a while, because the room finally understood that dignity does not have to shout to be heard, and kindness, when guarded long enough by truth, can become the quietest kind of miracle.